Voiceover Coffee Shop, Episode 8.
Welcome to the Voiceover Coffee Shop, where we share our morning with some of the finest names in voiceover. And now, here's your host, voice actor Andrew Morrison.
Hi there. My name is Andrew Morrison, and welcome to the Voiceover Coffee Shop, where we start our day with some of the finest names in voiceover. If you'd like to know more about me, feel free to visit my personal website at www.voicebard.com. In today's episode, we have my dear friend, Troy W. Hudson. With over 30 years in the industry, this all-American veteran artist has narrated over 60 audiobooks, e-learning modules, nationally broadcast commercials, and many more. Troy tells us how he's found his way through the industry by building strong relationships with every client he takes on. Hey, Troy, how are you doing?
Andrew, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a kick to be on your program.
Of
really
course, it's great to have you here.
That's a really nice introduction, by the way. I was like, oh, he's talking about me. It took me a while to figure that out.
So, Troy, how do you take your coffee?
I can go back and forth. I used to do the frou-frou flavored creamers.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to black, and then I quit and did tea for a while. And now I'm doing just a little smidge of like a half and half non-flavored cream because I'm doing like a special diet, and I'm not even supposed to be drinking coffee, but I don't think
Right, keeps us up for the late nights of recording and editing, right?
Yes, I've been known to. I don't burn the midnight oil like I used to, but yeah, it definitely gets you going in the morning when you got to do something really fast. Yeah.
So how did you go from the military to voiceover? What was that transition? I know that's probably a long story, but
It's more like a long time ago. Well, kids, it goes all the way back to 1984. I did active duty U.S. Army from 1984 to 1989. Signed up. My stepfather actually was my Army recruiter. I had no idea what I was going to do out of high school. I had a possibility of going to college, but I really didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was confused, like many 18-year-olds can be. And so he suggested there was a school in the military for radio, television, broadcast journalism. And I had no idea that existed in the military. And apparently all the branches had a variation of that. And so I had moved to Utah from Tennessee when I was 14. And 3-4 years later, the accent, I don't know if you can hear it now, but the accent that I had was really thick and country in Tennessee. And when I moved to Utah, over the years, it kind of slowly got diluted a bit, unless I really just wasn't thinking about it. You know, when you're a kid, you want to fit in. So it had kind of whittled away to the point where it was manageable. So the military sent me this script to audition with and send it back on. I don't know if you kids know what cassette tapes are, but way back when, audio cassette was the way we would send stuff in. And so I had my little home recorder, and I must have practiced that script 200 times, trying to get it just right, because I didn't know what they were looking for. And so I sent it off, and it came back a couple of weeks later, and they said I was approved to go to the school. And so it was a whirlwind of like 4 months of intensive in front of the camera stuff. I had no clue. I actually had to get through basic training before I got there. So that was 8 weeks of that before I got, into the school. And up in Fort Bend Harrison, Indiana, in the Indianapolis area. And so when I graduated, the premium assignment, there were 2 assignments. If you went to Europe, AFN Europe, Armed Forces Network Europe, that was a premium assignment, Germany. If you went to Korea, AFKN, Korean Network, that was a plum assignment. And where did I go? I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And any stateside assignment that at that point in time for an Army broadcaster, it was just, it was not good. It had no reflection on what you did in school. It was just this, where they decided this person goes to this assignment, and it was just totally random. So I went there with nothing to do. but there were some very kind and generous and understanding people in the command group who understood. I got assigned to a psychological operations group in the U.S. Army, part of the Special Ops Command there. And interesting assignment, but there was nothing for this particular job. There was nothing, my job didn't exist in that unit. They were going to build something later. But in the meantime, I'd gone through this school. I was ready to do my job. I was excited about radio, TV broadcasting. And I get there, and a commander heard about me and found out that I needed some work in that field. And they actually assigned me across post to the headquarters in a special duty assignment. And so I lived with the unit I was with, and I went to work across the post and did radio, TV broadcasting. I had a morning radio show. I did radio production. I learned all these amazing things from these incredibly talented people, OJT basically after school. And then they put me in to a TV host position alongside a female co-host. And it was like a news magazine program, and we traveled all over the post, and it was a phenomenal thing. A couple of years later, the unit I was with brought me back. And for 3 years, I worked in like a state-of-the-art multimedia production center, learned how to edit video, and got out in '89 thinking, the world's my oyster. But it didn't quite work out that way, moving into the civilian world.
So I know that you're really big on relationship building with your clients. How do you think that factors into what you've done overall, how you've gotten to where you are? And also, what relationships did you start to foster when you did go off into the civilian world?
It took me a while to get traction. I spent a year doing construction labor after I got out of the military in '89. It wasn't until about '90 that I got my first TV production job as a director, directing morning news and a little bit of voiceover on the side. I knew that the VO thing was kind of cool, but other than radio at the time in 1990, I had no idea that there was anything other than radio. Progress fast forward into the next stage of the post-military stuff. For almost 10 years, I worked for a utility company, a big utility company in South Carolina, doing video production and voiceover work. And so I began to understand the potential for voiceover work. And then another gig later on as just a video editor, roll really fast forward to 2012 to get to the answer to your question. All along the way, I mean, I looked at the people that I admired and that I considered mentors, not necessarily in voiceover, but in the media production field. And the people that had the most success, it was obvious. And I was raised this way too, to just have good manners, to show graciousness, to be thankful, to have what I call a gratitude attitude, and just treat people with the utmost respect and make them enjoy working with you. And to me, that seemed like kind of a no-brainer. That's just how you treat people. But, that's not always the way, the business world works, because in media, you come in contact with all different kind of business, companies and career fields. But, I was fortunate enough to work with some really amazing people that helped me grow, and that I've tried to do the same thing with lesser experienced people. Will ask me, what did you do? How did you do it? What's the basic tenet of trying to build a successful business, or to just be successful in any field you're in, if it's media or otherwise? And the first thing I will tell them is to be nice to people and be gracious to people and be thankful for anybody willing to extend a hand to help you with no agenda. They're just there because they like to help other people along the way. And I think because I've been in contact with people like that throughout my career, it's fostered in me that idea that it just makes good sense, and it's just the right thing to do. In 2012, when I was totally on my own after I got laid off because the business shut down in the video production or the video editing job I had, the last one, I basically was just trying to figure out what to do. Voiceover seemed like the natural progression of things because I only had so much money to invest in gear. I had a nice Mac. I could do video production. I could do it on the side. I did do it on the side. I had a camera that I bought. I could do that on the side. But I found that the voiceover was such a a faster track to get things going as far as, do the job, get paid for the job. There's not a lot of variables. It's either right or it's not. Video, it's such a longer process, and there's so many variables and so many things a client can find, that it's, this needs to be tweaked or that needs to be tweaked.
Mhm.
While I didn't have all the answers on how to start a voiceover business, I knew that the basic principles, and they continue to be with the way I run the business, is just to treat people right, treat people with respect, reach out to them, be extra gracious. I think a couple of years ago, I started sending out these like gift boxes or gratitude boxes to the clients that had been with me for a long time. Even the service industry folks that have nothing to do with media production, I made a decision to thank them for them allowing me to be able to do what I do. And I'm talking about, it may seem odd, but these people help support me so I don't have to be down or be away from the studio. I sent boxes to my auto mechanic. I sent boxes to my tax accountant. I sent gratitude boxes to my dentist. I sent gratitude boxes to several other people that weren't related to making me money, but they allowed me to do what I do easier.
Right.
Keeping my teeth healthy, keeping my vehicle running, keeping my taxes straight. Don't do your own taxes. I learned that the hard way. And I'm not saying there was a degree of, extra thankfulness, but it saved me a good bit of headache, not having to deal with the IRS and just going, here, what do you want? Just take these and let me pay you for whatever it's worth. So a gratitude attitude is really obviously delivering, excellent work and learning your craft and doing that and getting all the technical part worked out and having some sense of the ability to promote yourself or, to have good demos and things like that other voice actors do. Education, I mentioned that, but just being a good person, just going by that idea that everybody that comes in contact with you, you're not using them to get to somewhere else. You're nurturing that relationship right then and there. And I've had some amazing clients I've worked with over the years, Andrew, that since I started this thing, that still call on me to do work. And when I develop a relationship, I like to keep it going, just keep fostering it and just keep building on it. And as time changes, if their business changes, trying to figure out what that means for me to help them solve their solutions. So yeah, I mean, it's completely about customer service and just being grateful for having the work, because
Right.
they have a lot to choose from in this day and age. There's a lot of people doing what we do. So you have to find ways to stand out. And for me, that's just something I focus on.
So what lured you to get away from everything else and take that leap, to take that risk of, I want to be my own boss and I want to be my own business owner?
It wasn't like I woke up one day, the day after I got laid off. I found out my boss came in on October 1st. I remember it distinctly. There's certain things you never forget. October 1st of 2012. And he walked in and it was a short conversation. And I remember walking out feeling like I'd never been physically shot. I'd never been in a fight where somebody punched me in the gut, but
Right.
that is as close as I can come to trying to describe what that felt like. And so I had no idea. I was totally floored. And I vaguely remember walking around this city park just in circles for a couple of hours trying to figure out what I was going to do. Just like, deer in the headlights kind of thing. And a short time after that, thank God, I'm a Christian, so I relied on my faith and relied on friends helping me through this, that I was able to kind of shift out of that mode of fear and uncertainty into, okay, I need a plan. I have skills, I have abilities, I have a little bit of savings set aside. What am I going to do? And so between October and December of 2012, I made that decision. Okay, I've got to do something. I've got some vacation savings. I'm going to buy a new Macintosh computer. And that didn't seem logical at the time, but I really felt led to get my ammo together or get my tools ready for whatever was coming. Thankfully that the employer we left on good terms. So they sent me a lot of freelance work for like 6-8 months after that. So that was a good bridge.
Oh, that's
But it wasn't
great.
enough. but it wasn't enough to pay the mortgage. And, I had this habit of eating. And so between the bills and the appetite, it was, and there was a big mortgage. So, it was not a good situation. So, so it was a slow process of figuring out, okay, what do I do? So I bought a new Mac. I bought a Blue Yeti USB mic, and I had no clue as to, I'd been in studios before, but I had no clue as to how to rig up a home studio. I had the stuff sitting in a dining room with 10-foot ceilings with no acoustical treatment whatsoever. And I started looking, first place I found work was on elance.com, which eventually got gobbled up by, I think it was Odesk, which then became Upwork, if you're familiar with that.
I am.
But at the time, Elance, I put all my eggs in there because I didn't know where else to look. And so I started booking small jobs and then started booking a few more. The sound quality, I listened back to it now. I've still got some old samples from back then. They were atrocious. I mean, I could speak and make words goodly, but it was the sounds like echoey, 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 echoey. It was like, just walk into any bathroom, kitchen, or wherever, and it was just bouncing all over the place. And I'm thinking, but they're hiring me to do these little jobs. So as I went, I began to learn. I began to watch YouTube videos, but it really wasn't until probably a couple of years into that, kind of making just enough to get by with smaller gigs, that I started to think, this could actually be something. I'm enjoying the freedom of this. For the first 40 years of my work life, now 35 years of my work life, in up to 2012, I was always hired. I worked for somebody else. I never had an overwhelming desire to want to go out and do my own business, because I had good paying jobs, and so you assume it's always going to be there. And that's a big mistake.
Right.
I wasn't prepared, but when I was thrust into it, I began to learn as I went. And so it was a couple of years in, about 2014, 2015, I said, this could be something. In the meantime, I had a few job interviews for video editor positions. One, they flew me out to Birmingham and said, we're going to pay you a lot of money, and all you can do is sit here all day and do cookie cutter car advertisements, edit them. And on the surface, it was a foolish move to go, no, that's not what I want to do. But as I was flying back from Birmingham to Columbia in South Carolina, where I'm at, things were starting to turn in the direction with the voiceover business. It was starting to get more profitable. I was making more per gig. I was learning. I had upgraded my mic. I had begun to learn a little bit more about treating an area. I was using different software. I was getting better at the craft. I was learning things on YouTube. And it was at a point in time where it was like a very big crossroad for me. And I had to make that choice to say, am I going to take this serious? Am I going to do this seriously? Am I going to go with the voiceover thing that I've been doing? Like, this is a freelance thing. It's not a business. Or am I going to go back to what I know, but work for somebody else? And I had to look at the freedom I had as a self-employed freelancer, or I wasn't calling myself self-employed at the time. I was just waiting for my first, for the real job to show back up.
Right.
And it was at that point in probably 2015 that I decided, 2015, I think I can do this full time. So I began to immerse myself and watch a lot of videos from a guy named Bill DeWeese, who, was known all over the place as like so many people's mentors. And it turns out several years later, he would actually produce my commercial and e-learning narration demo, which was a crazy circle of like, watching him and being kind of like, oh man, this guy knows so much. And I'm learning so much from him. Finally ended up paying him to do my demo years later. It wasn't until, I want to say 2015, 2016 that I started to look at what I was doing as a business and actually approaching it as like, I need to market. I need to put stuff on social media. I need to get some demos produced, because up until that time I was doing a DIY demo. Is that DIY? Yeah. Did my own. And that was not a good thing to do, but it booked me a few gigs and it got me noticed enough to where, I thought, oh yeah, with more practice and a better demo, I can do this. So I didn't know voiceover coaching even existed. And it wasn't until I had my first commercial demo produced in 17 or 18 that I realized having a coach help me through the demo process, how beneficial that could be. I've taken some classes since then, but for the most part, it's basically self-taught. The commercial work, the narration, the e-learning, just simply having a passion to do that kind of work. Kid stories, character voices for some indie video games, just all over the spectrum. IVR phone work, anything and everything. Not really feeling the need to specialize, but just having fun with the whole process, to be honest with you. I do kind of like e-learning and kid stories, so if I had to pick two. So yeah, those two.
I think everybody books their the bulk of their work from like one specific place, just because you have certain tones. Like for me, I do a lot of animation work and I do a lot of video game work. But outside of that spectrum, a majority of what I get is e-learning and audiobooks because of the way that I enunciate. And so that's where figuring out where your voice fits in with someone else's branding comes in handy. So do you enjoy doing the most? Which jobs do you enjoy doing the most? Like which ones are you just like, yes, I got another one? Like
I get excited every time I get a script or we get to work with a new client, but I will tell you that e-learning gets me jazzed, and it sounds kind of nerdy,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's a challenge because I do a lot of e-learning work for a lot of the same companies over and over and over again. So I'm familiar over time with the kind of subject matter, the kind of way the way the team writes, the way the individual designers kind of approach it. If I need to tweak or proof it a little bit because it's not 100%, exact, and I can kind of get it when it's not. I like to break it down to make it conversational. I mean, I like that challenge of getting e-learning script and flying through it and scanning through really as fast as I get the script. I will stop what I'm doing and they'll send me, several thousand words, and I'll just scan through the PDF document and I'll find a couple acronyms I don't know, or I'll find some weird, industry term that they have to look up themselves, and I send it back to them and ask. So it's that challenge of getting that. I get a kick out of a commercial work when they send me 100 and plus words for a 30-second spot, and they say, "Can you make that work?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, I can make that work." And I'm not the fastest reader, by any stretch, but there's things you can do in the editing process to get things, whittled down enough to where it's just barely going to fit.
Mhm.
And you're like, "Wow, how'd you get those 10 pounds into that 5-pound sack?" It's like a lot of practice, and secret sauce. You never tell them exactly what you're doing. Trying to find the words that, in shorter scripts anyway, that really need emphasis. I find that exciting. Kid stories, I mentioned children's stories where I get to just go absolutely bonkers creatively with character voices or just bringing to life. I had a client hire me to do, I think it's up to 16 stories now. A company that started in New Zealand. They found me, I think it was on Elance 7 years ago, I think it was. And we continue to work together. And they started out, it was called Bible Pathway Adventures. And they wanted to just do, it was kind of a test thing. They wanted to put audio in because it was more illustrations and games and things like that for the kids. And then the first voiceover I did, I thought, maybe I'll throw in, because it had, it was rich in Bible history and characters. I think it may have been, I think it was the story of David and Goliath. So I was having a lot of fun with Goliath, doing all the stuff, playing with it, the pitch
Wow.
control in Adobe Audition, and I added, some sound effects, and then I put some dramatic cinematic music in there. And then, the battle scene and the crashing of, the giant and all this, and the clanking of the swords and the battle. I brought it completely to life. And that, just doing the full mix of something like that just was such a thrill. And knowing that how it was used and how it was distributed. And then we would end up doing 15 more stories over the years, and we're continuing to do them. that just stirs me up to be able to do a full mix, to basically the full audio tapestry, as I call it. When you're looking at your timeline and it's like 10, 12, tracks deep, and you're going and you're listening back to it, and you're not going, oh, I sounded good. You're listening to the whole thing later, the second or third time back, to make sure everything's good. And you're thinking, man, that really sounded good. When it's all mixed together, it's just like you put all those pieces together, and that's a big kick for me. So e-learning, kid stories, finding unique ways to do commercials if it looks like it's not going to quite make it on time. But those things give me a spark. All the stuff I do. I mean, if I get phone messages, I'm still thinking I'm representing this person's business. This is a big deal for them. Somebody's going to call and they're going to get an impression. And I think we talked about this before. They are trusting you to be the voice or the sound or the reputation or the feeling that someone gets when they pick up the phone and they call, and they can't get somebody, but it's going to voicemail or to their after-hour messages. And you are that identifier. You are that brand. You are bringing it as far as being professional and authoritative. Or I've had people say, we want this. What's the hardware store? We want it kind of blue collar and laid back. So I'll just go into this. All right, well, here we go. Welcome to calling for, whatever hardware store. We're doing this. We got a special going on right now. And I look as if I'm just looking at you and talking to you. I'm not going, thank you for calling the hardware store. You've reached us after hours. It's a totally different vibe. And thankfully, that most of the e-learning I do is very similar to that. It's very, you mentioned Texas before. One of the biggest e-learning clients I have is based in Texas, and their target audience are people that work in the gas pipeline industry. And these are men and women. I just want to call them strong, blue collar workers. And I think about those target audiences that I'm talking to. And so you're always I try to imagine who I'm talking to and kind of tailor it in that direction. They're intelligent, but they don't want the strict, reading off regulations like this. They want you to look at it so you're familiar enough with it to go, you're reading it like this and you're explaining it to them. And you want to be careful out there, guys and ladies. It's a different vibe. So that e-learning is not as structured, I think, as it once was. And especially when the client understands that and they're like, be conversational, be real, be genuine. Don't be so boxy sounding or so like they got anybody to do it. And that's why they hired me to do it, so I could interpret that and make it sound conversational, and to make sure that you're not putting them to sleep. So that's always a challenge, especially with like a 9,000 or 10,000 word script.
Right.
It can be a challenge, but those things are what I really like.
So when you're talking to a new potential client, how do you help them to perceive that value of that? Because they already have, a lot of businesses already know the value of their branding, but how do you convince them that you're the branding that they want? If that makes sense.
I think it starts with, it does make sense. It's like, how do you convince them that what they've got, they need something better? It's like, it's good. But first off, I never try to kind of do hard sell with them. If we can't just have a conversation, I've had clients contact me on LinkedIn. They would cold call me. I'm not a big one for reaching out and cold calling. I will send emails to prospects if I see, they're in a similar industry or they would be an interesting client to work with, or I've seen their stuff and it's like, I'd like to be part of that. But I've had clients call me and they were interviewing me for feeling me out. It's like, well, what makes you different, or what makes you special, or what makes you stand out? And I will just tell them quite honestly, I care about what I do. I care about your business. I care about communicating to the people that you are talking to and trying to train, whether it's something legal thing they have to do, or if it's a life and death big deal they have to know because it's a safety related thing, or if it's just how to use a computer, a piece of software they've got and they're bringing it into the company. And this is like, they got to get it done fast. It runs a gamut. The basic thing is just establish that rapport with them to let them know that you genuinely care about their industry or what their objective is, or find out what their problem is that needs to be solved. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, what is it that I can do for you that's not being done right now? And just letting them know, and then following up with just outrageous fast delivery and customer service, and asking the right questions and proofing the script to where there's, if you find something that's a little bit off, the punctuation or the grammar or something, you just fix it. You don't email them every time. Once you've got, the business there, you don't email them and tell them, well, I found this and this and this and this and this, because why would you do that? It's like, if you can read it and you understand you need to tweak it or change it, just do it. And I think that endears you to them even more once they see that you care that much about the process and about the message. And then if you're following up with great audio, and you're following up with a caring attitude, and it's all that rolled into one, but getting your foot in the door, obviously, they don't know who you are, and you could say you care, and you could say, you want the best for their business, and they're thinking, is this a script, or is this, not?
Right.
If they can understand you're being actually genuine, and you are actually genuine about it, then I think that comes through. But it all boils down to, they got to like you. They've got to like the prospect of working with you. They can listen to your demos. They can hear the clients list you've worked with. You can do samples for them, but it's still a leap for them, because a lot is riding on this. And I've several times I would just do almost like a demo or an audition. It's like, just send me something and let me do it for you, no charge. Let me see how that plugs in with your instructional designers for e-learning specifically. Plug it in, see how that works. Do you want MP3? Do you want WAV? Are there certain specs? That's my dog's. I apologize for that. I left the door open on my studio. I don't know if you can hear that or not. Well, they only do this when I'm doing a live or a Zoom or something like that.
Right.
I think they know. So it ultimately it comes down to just building that relationship and showing them that you're genuine, that you care, and it's not an act. It's really no more complicated than that for me, and that works for me. And then after the fact, you treat them like gold. I mean, these people, like I said, we talked about this before. They have a lot of options to choose from. They could get it done in-house probably, and I've seen groups transition to that more and more. Saying, well, here's a cost-cutting thing. We'll get somebody to do it in-house. And the last thing you want to do if they're doing that is to go, come on, I can do a lot better than that. You don't want to cop that arrogant attitude. That's the last thing you want to do.
Right.
If you can do it better than that, then have them send you the script, and don't say anything else. Say, would you allow me to send you a sample of that project I heard? And would it be too much trouble to plug that in and listen to it? To just, let me see what I can do for you. No charge. And sometimes it's good enough to where, well, let's take a chance on this. And sometimes it's, you sound great, but it's just not in the budget. At that point you go, great. And if it's at some point it is, please keep my contact information. Just shoot them an email, not to badger them, but just thanking them. Send them something, whether it's a mug or a thank you card or something, just to let them know you appreciate them and that you're not a jerk and you're walking away. Well, fine, I don't need you, that kind of dumb stuff like that, or just cut off all contact. You put them in the mailing list, you contact them to make sure everything's cool. You check in on them, and go from there, and then move on. It may circle back around. So it's relationships. It's definitely relationships.
Right. So what, other than the relationship side of it, what tool do you think helped you along the way to get this far? Like, was it the military side of it? Was it the broadcast side of it? Was it the getting your commercial coaching? Like, what do you think helped you to be able to deliver that message in a way where it's relatable to their audience, and figuring out who their audience is?
I think it's a combination of those things you said. It's the education process, it's the practice, it's learning over time, it's watching other people do what I'm doing.
Mhm.
It's listening to mentors that really get it, that are genuine, that are teaching something, but they're also making money doing voiceover at the same time. They're not just, teaching without doing. But I think just the practice part of it is huge. Just, you get enough years and you start to learn, well, that didn't work. Let me do this. Well, being nice is always going to be a good thing to do, but you got to back that up with, fast customer service. You got to figure out solutions sometimes when your stuff breaks. You got to have backup stuff ready to plug in. You've got to have a plan B when plan A falls apart. We were talking about this before, on a live Zoom session or a live Skype session or recording session. If something breaks or, falls apart, you've got to have something to go back to. And you've got to be flexible. You've got to be extremely sensitive to the client's schedule and the time zones involved, because I work with people, and you probably do too, all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing you want to do, now there are limits. I mean, I'm not going to get up at 2:00 in the morning because, somebody over on the other side of the world is, it's 2:00 in the afternoon there. There is a limit, because you have a life, but you work out a convenient time. If they're in Europe and it's 7 hours ahead, then you say on the East Coast, then you say, oh, well, let's work it out at like 9 or 10 in the morning. So that's like later in the afternoon for them. So it's convenient. It's all about making sure you're flexible, because it's not, we know we don't work for just local clients or just people in the US. So you've got to have that flexibility. So flexibility, learning experience, education, with a good coach is big. But one of the coaches I worked with kept saying, you can only get so much coaching. And ultimately what it comes down to is you've got to find your voice. I mean, your natural speaking voice is what most people want to hear. They don't want the hype unless it's for a special project. You're doing an announcer thing on purpose. But most of the projects you're doing, you've got to get comfortable with knowing what your normal speaking voice is. And that coach was basically, they were saying, this is what books national jobs. This is what books repeat clients, that you don't have to put on anything or remember what you did the last time, unless it's a character.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just doing your natural thing, then you find you find ways to bring it down or bring it up as far as emotion for what the script calls for. And so I think that was really the last coaching I got, because it brought it all together. It's like I could keep learning and keep getting coaching. And I'm not saying that it's not the right thing for some people, but for me, it's like, okay, I know in my head what I need to do. I know the mechanics of making this stuff come out normally, depending on how many syllables we're talking about. I avoid medical e-learning at all costs. I don't do that. It scares me when I see that, the long words. It's just not worth it. But everything else is like the mechanics are there. The feeling is right. You're not pushing it. You're not forcing it out. You're not announcing. You're just telling a story. And it should be a really natural thing. If you've done it enough times and you're comfortable hearing yourself and the copy, then we got a good job, man. We got a seriously good job. We got a really good job.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely.
We are very blessed to be able to do what we do. It never fails to amaze me and make me appreciate how blessed I am. Two things: when I'm in the summertime in South Carolina, watching construction workers, God bless them, nothing against construction workers, but I would not want to be in 100-degree heat in a pit or on a road crew doing that. It's like when I come in my studio, it's like, oh my goodness, I get to do this for a living. People want me to talk in a padded room. This is a good gig. And the other thing is, if I happen to be out and see rush hour traffic coming, and it's like 4 lanes of traffic backed up, I'm like, I don't have to do that. This is my work spot. And the kitchen's 10 feet that way and the bathroom's that way, and just close the door and keep the dogs quiet and happy. And then I can do my thing. And so, yeah, I never take it for granted to be able to do what I do. Super blessed. Blessed.
So you've obviously learned in 30 years, you've learned so much about the industry. And if you were to write yourself a letter to yourself when you first started in the industry, what would that letter say to your past self?
Boy, that came out of left field. What would I say? That's one of those. Let me see. Wise guy with a pipe. What would I write to myself? Learn more early on. Don't think you know. Don't rely on the fact that you are self-taught and that you can teach yourself how to do things. Rely on people and pay for the training early on, so you move along faster on the track. And that part, you've got a foundation. You're still yourself, but you have a foundation. Dear Troy, learn quicker, learn from more outside sources. Don't rely on yourself. I tend to be very self-reliant, just like, I'll learn it myself. I'll teach that software to myself. I'm not going to read the directions, that sort of stuff. I'll figure it out as I go. And you can move along faster if you find good, trusted people to learn from. So learn earlier. I'm trying to think what else, because that process. Oh, I know something I've told other people in a different interview was because the self-reliant kind of isolated thing that I'm in, I think we can tend to be isolated and not reach out and network with other people, not necessarily classes, but just learning, like what we're doing right here on your show, just learning, from other people from different backgrounds, different ages. I'm 57, okay, but I find such gold nuggets sometimes talking to people in their 20s and 30s of coming up in this business. It's like, I had no idea how to do that. I had no idea. So that old dog, new trick kind of thing, I'm a big believer in that. So learning is such a key thing. So I'm writing this letter to me. I'm going, buddy, you better learn from some of the best early on. Ask questions. Don't be shy. Network with people. Get out there and learn more about the marketing aspect of the business. Oh, and by the way, in 20 years, there'll be a thing called Facebook and Instagram. Invest in that. Because back then, the letter.
Right.
But those kind of things there. And I'm a big believer in social media too. I do a lot of that, just for awareness and presence sake, just to put stuff out there. So, but that would be the gist of the letter. Learn and network and make more connections. And I'd be further along than I am now, because to be honest, I've only been doing this part of it for 8 years, 9 this year. But because I was relying on other people and other businesses to get me, to where I'm at. But obviously I learned something about voiceover, but it wasn't until the 8-year crash course of having to do it as a business, that's when it kind of, hush puppy. That sounded odd. But that's kind of what the gist of the letter. That's what it would be. Just wise up and reach out.
I really hope you enjoyed hearing Troy talk about how a man from any walk of life can fall in love with the beauty of storytelling and foster that love through simple acts of kindness. If you'd like to know more about him, you can check out his demos, work, and more at www.troywhudson.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Voiceover Coffee Shop. For more information on guests, new episodes, and more, be sure to visit www.vocoffeeshop.com.